First of all, I just want to say I was a practicing cardiovascular and thoracic surgeon for 15 years prior to coming to Congress, and thank you all the witnesses for being here. I also want to say that it's totally appropriate to reevaluate and examine ethical issues that have been examined in the past. Times do change, and so I know some of the narrative has been that in the past people have looked at these issues and come to conclusions, but in health care particularly, I think it's important that we occasionally re-examine these issues. The other thing is based on some of the comments of the Democrat colleagues, I'm not sure what everyone's so afraid of, because this type of discussion about ethics is totally appropriate, and we don't have a preconceived outcome. And I would also just remind everybody in the crowd that charges and indictments don't mean convictions and guilt. With that, I would like to go to Exhibit B1 and go over some emails. In the first, and you may have those, in the first to the customer, this is between a tissue technician and a customer. I'm going to walk you through this. We're now ready to include the skull, so if you would please include that in our order for tomorrow, that would be great. If there is a case tomorrow, could you please have someone contact me with the condition of both the long bones and the calvarium, which is the head, and I will be happy to let you know if we would like one or both. 4 minutes later, the technician responds, I would be happy to do that. Exhibit B2. The customer replied a day later, just want to check in and see if there were any cases within our gestational range for today. The technician responded 4 minutes later, there is one case currently in the room. I will let you know how the limbs and calvarium look to see if they are able to take them, which means they are discussing actively during the abortion itself. 3 minutes later, the client said, great, thank you so much. Exhibit B3, after the abortion is performed, the technician tells the customer, the calvarium, the head, is mostly intact with a tear up the back suture line, but all pieces look to be there. The limbs, one upper, one lower, are totally intact, with one upper broken at the humerus, which is the upper arm bone, and one lower limb broken above the knee. Please let me know if these are acceptable. I'll set them aside, and we'll wait for your reply. 5 minutes later, the customer replies, that sounds great. We would like both of them. Please send them our way. Thanks again. The technician says limbs and calvarium will be there at 3:30 to 4 o'clock. And we'll hear later in testimony, and there's evidence to show that technicians are partially paid by the number of body parts that they could get. So given that, did these emails raise any ethical issues, and if so, what are they? Dr. Donovan?
Once again, I think that what we are seeing is a total lack of respect for the dignity of the human body in this case, because as we've already pointed out, not only are these humans, but these are human body parts, otherwise no one would be interested in them. But to order them, piece by piece, like you'd order a McDonald's hamburger, I find discouraging and shocking.
Ms. Cunningham? I
do find a number of serious ethical problems, one being, apart from the question of abortion itself, I think this completely fails to isolate abortion from the decision about the fetal tissue and consent to use of the fetal tissue. In what we see here, there is no indication of consent prior to this procedure or for these specific parts to be excised.
And in fairness, that could have occurred earlier, I guess.
It could. I just said there's nothing here to indicate that.
Ms. Charo?
I would just like to add a little bit of context, because exactly the same kind of language would be used if we were talking about people ordering tissue from adults who had died and were now having their bodies used for tissue and organ recovery. It's the same kind of clinical, dispassionate language that is deeply upsetting to many of us who are not in that world and are not familiar with that. As you as a physician have said, there's a world of difference in how we talk about things. And
okay, well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and there's a world of tissue transplantation and tissue research with adult tissue out there that is enormous and is very little different from what we are seeing here. So just a little context about how this all
Sure.
works.
And I'd like to say, as a physician, during my training, I spent a lot of time on transplantation, both talking to recipients and also family members of people who were in an unfortunate situation, making a decision on behalf of their loved one to donate organs. And I think that talking about a human being with like this, just the mere fact that the arm was broke and the leg was broke, and they're talking about the head separately of a human being, is something to me that that's pretty hard to take as a physician. I yield back.